With Season 18, we have finally received the last subclass revamp in the form of Arc 3.0, bringing with the ability to mix and match some of your favorite Arc abilities of the past, or in the case of Stormcaller, outright combining them in the form of Landfall and Ionic Blink. Now, after spending some time with Arc 3.0 on Warlock and the Quick Play Championships, I can confidently say that Stormcaller can be an outright menace in the Crucible. With the right combination of aspects and fragments, you'll be absolutely slaying out in no time. So if you're wondering where to start with Arc 3.0 on Warlock, or just looking to optimize your build for PvP, then this video is for you. Today, I'm going to cover the aspects, fragments, stats, and exotics you should be using to help you excel in the Crucible. Now let's get into the video, and if you find this build helpful, make sure you drop a like as it helps support the channel. Starting off with our super, and we have two options here in Chaos Reach and Storm Trance, and interestingly enough, they both have the same base cooldown of 9 minutes and 16 seconds. Personally here, I don't feel Chaos Reach is any good in PvP. You can't destroy a bubble. You'll probably get killed out of it before you can kill someone in a well. And it's just really hard to get multiple kills with this super versus Storm Trance. And what they've done with Storm Trance is they've given it a little bit of a buff, kind of. What they've done is they combined Ionic Blink, so the ability to teleport forward, which also uses a small amount of super energy, as well as the Landfall, which is when you cast it and it shoots all the kind of lightning out into the ground and kind of creates like an AoE effect and kills people around you. This is much better in my opinion than Chaos Reach. It's still not nearly the best super in the game, don't get me wrong, but when you combine Landfall and Ionic Blink, it can give it some versatility. And the way I found a lot of success using Storm Trance is really using it to bait in enemies, often floating above a door or jumping over a well and then casting it, using that Landfall to get a couple kills, kind of clearing the area, and then you can kind of teleport around from there. I don't really use it to pop and then as like a true roaming super. I use it more as a counter when I'm kind of drawing in the enemy, and then I'll jump in the air and cast the super to use Landfall, again get those multiple kills, and then kind of see if I can get any kills from there. I do find though that in Storm Trance it's just a little bit too squishy, and by squishy meaning a little easy to get killed out of, so I try to stay away from using it all too often. Diving into our abilities and starting with our Rift, we're going to be using Healing Rift. And this goes for a majority of the builds I kind of put out. Healing Rift, the ability to kind of lock down an area or quickly regain your health via your Healing Rift, is just so strong in today's meta, and it's something I highly recommend using. Powering Rift does have its uses, but I would say overall, the overall utility and ability to significantly increase your survivability via your Healing Rift merely makes it second to none. It is incredibly powerful for, just like I said, locking down certain areas or in a pinch getting your health back and really challenging multiple enemies at once because you're regaining so much health at once. From there, you're going to want to use Burst Glide. Burst Glide is going to give us the most linear movement for Warlock without being too floaty. All these other jumps are going to make you feel a little bit too floaty, and you're going to get caught stuck in the air where you're less accurate than ever. So we want to make sure we're using something that allows us to stay linear, close to the ground, and build a decent amount of momentum to get around the map as quickly as possible. Next, for our melee, we have Chain Lightning, and you can see here we have two choices: Chain Lightning or Ball Lightning. Ball Lightning's base cooldown is 1:53, and Chain Lightning's base cooldown is 1:30. And personally, I prefer Chain Lightning, and this is going to really depend on the aspect we're going to talk about later, but mainly for the lower base cooldown, I don't think any or either of these melees is anything to write home about. Ball Lightning does have some utility in terms of throwing it over Titan shields or throwing it over cover. I've just found it travels a little too slowly and doesn't do quite enough damage, so I don't really utilize it. Versus even if Chain Lightning, not even talking about the aspect yet, it does proc very quickly, and then they did also boost the base range by 1 meter or 2, if I recall correctly, making this even more effective. And again, I just like how quickly it casts, so it's really good for those shotgun follow-ups. For our grenade, man, we have a couple of options here. In the past, I would have definitely said Storm Grenade. If I was on Titan, I would say Storm Grenade. I don't want to talk about it. But for overall utility and just kind of combining that with the overall cooldown, you're still going to want to go Pulse Grenade here. Pulse Grenade has the most utility against things like Titan Shields or Titan Barricades, just like getting an enemy out from cover, blocking off a corridor for a sustained amount of time. There's just so much utility via the Pulse Grenade. I do still really enjoy the Storm Grenade, but I did notice it's not quite as effective as it used to be, which is okay. Or I also really enjoyed the Flashbang Grenade for just really slowing down enemies who are playing really aggressively with that blinding. Again, depending on the aspects and fragments you're using, that could be more beneficial. But overall, in terms of utility and multiple ways it could be used, I think Pulse Grenade is going to be your best option here. Getting into our aspects, and this is really where we get to our first aspect, which is, in my opinion, the star of the show, Lightning Surge. While sliding, activate your charged melee ability to blink forward, calling down lightning strikes that jolt targets as you rematerialize. And this melee ability is incredibly powerful. It is great for closing the gap. It's great for escaping because you do that short distance teleport. And so this melee ability is mainly why we chose Chain Lightning, to get that lower base cooldown, so that way when we use this, we can use it a little bit more frequently. And this is great for playing really aggressive and getting multiple kills, especially when two enemies are together. And something else I want to mention about Lightning Surge is there seems to be, I don't know if it's a bug or a glitch or whatever, but when you initially slide, and say you go to slide, shotgun, and then melee, your shotgun shot or your pellets are all centered. They're all centered in the middle, meaning you have a higher chance of getting a really easy one-hit kill with your shotgun, because all those pellets are going to be concentrated in one spot. And how you really want to use this is you want to go to slide, shotgun, melee, slide, shotgun, melee. And when you go to do that, you're going to slide shotty all, and then immediately go into your melee, or like your teleporting melee with this. And basically, as long as you do even like a sliver of damage, like I'm talking you hit them with one pellet from your shotgun, you're going to be most likely killing them and anyone around them because of this melee. I got so many 1, 2, 3 kills at a time because of Lightning Surge. It truly is an incredible aspect, and I think it's really underrated how good it is. I mean, maybe not, maybe that's just me, but I think we're really just barely at the tip of the iceberg with how good this aspect actually is. Next, we have Arc Soul. Cast your Rift, create an Arc Soul that fires at targets in front of you. Allies can pass through your Rift to get an Arc Soul. Your Rift charges faster when allies are near. And so this is really great because it's not only going to give us that constant Arc Soul, or Arc Buddy as it's often referred to, giving us that little bit of chip damage, making it easier to kill our enemies, but also it's going to have the effect of also giving our teammates Arc Souls, which is going to help the overall chemistry of our team and make our teammates hopefully a little bit more effective in the quick play championships, as well as improving the cooldown of our healing rift. We talked earlier about how strong our healing rift is, and with the Arc Soul, or this Arc Soul aspect, we get the benefit of having the Arc Soul and a slower rift cooldown when our allies are around us, which is great. So highly recommend this. The other option we would have had is Electrostatic Mind, and I think if you're focused heavily on jolting and blinding targets and all that to get the Ionic Traces, this could be worth it. But I've found the cooldown or timer or debuff, whatever you want to call it, for jolted and being blinded is just so short that it almost forces you to sometimes be a little bit more aggressive than you would want to be, to actually defeat an enemy who is either jolted or blinded, to take advantage of this aspect and get those Ionic Traces. So I found I wasn't getting Ionic Traces quite enough to justify choosing Electrostatic Mind over Arc Soul or Lightning Surge. I think no matter what you choose in this build for Arc 3.0 for Warlock, you have to use Lightning Surge, in my opinion. It is just too good to pass up. But between Arc Soul and Electrostatic Mind, depending what you're running, I could see some utility for Electrostatic Mind. Personally, Arc Soul I think is 100% the way to go. For our fragments, our starting one we're going to be talking about here is Spark of Recharge. While critically wounded, your melee and grenade energy regenerate more quickly. So anytime you essentially get your shields broken or you see your screen kind of flash red, you're going to get a nice little boost to your melee and grenade energy. So it's not just like one giant chunk. I guess ultimately at the end it is, but essentially what you'll see is your melee and grenade energy will start regenerating faster, or that bar will start filling up a little bit quicker, which is great to help us kind of get our grenade and melee back more frequently, because generally this is something that's just going to activate by you playing the game. Just by playing in the Crucible, taking damage, eventually you're going to get critically wounded and you're going to trigger Spark of Recharge, which is awesome because again, it's just going to help overall with the melee and grenade recharge. So it's just going to help with our cooldown in combination with our stats and stuff, which we'll talk about later. Next, we got Spark of Resistance. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. So this one is interesting because I'm not sure by exactly how much, in all transparency, how much resistance this adds. I do notice that it does proc in the Crucible when you're surrounded by a couple enemies, or sometimes even just one. But regardless of that, based on the other fragments that we can choose from, I still would choose this just because of the plus 10 strength, which again is just going to help with that cooldown of Lightning Surge. So that's why I really prefer Spark of Resistance. Again, not sure how much that resistance is, but any damage resistance in the Crucible is going to be super beneficial. See Omni Oculus, and then on top of that we get the plus 10 strength. Next, we have Spark of Feedback, and this is one of the more recently released fragments. Taking melee damage briefly increases your outgoing melee damage, and so this increases our melee, I believe, up to 160, and adds 10 resilient, which is great. So it's gonna make it to where when we get hit, we kind of immediately can do more damage with our follow-up melee, which in those shotgun trades or duels can be the difference in between us winning that fight or losing. So this is definitely something, again, that is just going to activate by you just playing the game. We don't have to do anything special to activate Spark of Feedback. And again, like I said, we get that plus 10 resilience, which is going to help reduce our flinch and our amount of health we have. Again, hopefully survive some of those closer engagement fights. Then lastly, we have Spark of Magnitude. Your lingering arc grenades, lightning grenade, pulse grenade, and storm grenade have extended duration. And so I'm mainly running this because I'm using pulse grenade. If I was using any other grenade, even storm grenade, I would probably not use this fragment. But it does make not a crazy difference, but a noticeable one for pulse grenade. When you are not running this fragment, you're gonna be looking at it, the grenade is gonna last about 4-ish seconds. With Spark of Magnitude, pulse grenade lasts roughly 6 seconds. So 2 seconds does not seem like a lot, but it can be a huge difference maker when it comes to a Titan shield or blocking that corridor for just 2 seconds longer, allowing you that much more time to either regain your health or 2 more ticks of damage potentially that your enemy could be taking running into this pulse grenade. So I definitely think it's worth it because it helps a grenade that already has a ton of utility and just increases the duration and makes it even better. So that's definitely a win in my book. Getting into the stats that you should be prioritizing for this build, first and foremost, per every Warlock build I've ever done, is going to be recovery. And I feel regardless of the character or class you're running, you should be prioritizing recovery. It just helps so much with your survivability and your ability to re-engage in gunfights really quickly and help your teammates, or again, just re-engage someone else. And if someone has lower recovery than you, you're gonna come out with fuller health than them. So it's really great to use, on top of the fact that for Warlock, we have the benefit of our recovery tying directly into our class cooldown, which for this build is going to tie directly into how much we can use our arc soul. And so really want to make sure we are prioritizing recovery over all else. Forget everything else before you get 100 recovery. Next from there, you can really disperse things how you would like. Overall, for me, I have a lot of value in having my grenade. I love using it against Titan barricades to block off corridors, or to kill an enemy who is behind cover, or for other warlocks who are kind of camping on their rift. I love having my grenade up as frequently as possible. And because we're using the pulse grenade, we're gonna want to get this discipline a little bit higher because it has the higher base cooldown. So for me, I like to get all my cooldowns roughly around 1 minute. So you can see here at tier 8 with the pulse grenade, that brings me to 1 minute and 1 second. Next, I really want to prioritize our strength, which is going to be our melee ability cooldown, which ties into Lightning Surge, which we talked about how good that was earlier. So the more strength we have, the more we're going to be able to utilize Lightning Surge. So I try to go a little bit higher here to get this just under 1 minute. But again, if you get it to 1 minute or lower, that's going to be great here. Intellect, I don't know if I would invest too heavily. I was lucky enough to be able to get to tier 7, which I feel like is as high as you should invest on intellect for Arc 3.0 for Warlock. It just gets you that nice sweet spot around 737 in terms of your cooldown. After that, you really start seeing those diminishing returns, and that's about as high as it go. But again, if you land around 5 or 6, I wouldn't say it's the end of the world as long as your other stats are kind of up to par. Next, I would say, honestly, a little bit more, I would say is more important than intellect for me, is resilience. This ties into how much we get flinched when using our weapons and our overall survivability. At tier 6 resilience, you can just survive barely so many additional things in Destiny 2 PvP. I can't go on and on about it here, but it's definitely worth getting to at least tier 6 resilience. You don't want to go too much higher. If you really wanted to protect your ability to get flinched, you could go all the way up to tier 100. I don't have armor good enough for that and still to be able to hit all my other stats, so I'm very confident and comfortable landing at tier 6. Mobility, as I've talked about in the past, I don't care about it. I don't invest in it. Again, if you enjoy it because you like how it helps your strafe speed or your overall movement speed and just the feel it gives your character, by all means. Personally, I don't notice it that much, so I do not invest in my mobility at all. So for me, I'd probably be going recovery, discipline, strength, resilience, intellect would be the order I would go through this in terms of importance for me. But again, based on your playstyle and how you want to run this build, feel free to kind of shift those around. Most important thing above all, like I mentioned earlier, is going to be getting your recovery to that 100 or tier 10 stat. Getting into our armor and exotics, we'll start with that you want to be using for this build, and I actually have a couple. In the past, I would say Apathettic aspects, and let's move on with our lives, and that's only partially true for this build, and it has a lot to do with Lightning Surge, but just to kind of get Apathettic aspect out of the way, depending on the weapons you're using, you may find this more valuable or not. If you already have a high handling primary or energy or both, then you might find a little bit less value in Apathettic aspect. But again, if you're running some lower handling stuff, like as you can see, I got this bottom dollar here where the handling is terrible, Apathettic aspect is going to be great for you. So it just really depends what you prefer. Again, I love running Apathettic aspect because of the overall responsiveness it gives my weapons. I like my weapons to respond as fast as I can, so that's why I love running Apathettic aspects. I just hate when my weapons feel sluggish. Now, the other options we have here is going to be Karnstein armlets, and I had a lot of fun running Karnstein armlets with this build. Melee kills restore health for a short duration, and so basically it continues to restore health even as you're taking damage. And so this paired with Lightning Surge is actually insane. You can fly in, get that melee kill with Karnstein armlets, your health starts regenning, and you can kind of just tear up any enemies that are left around you. And so I actually had a ton of fun running Karnstein armlets, so I would recommend trying this out if you haven't. This is a little bit of an older exotic, but still a great one, and especially with this build. And I even tried it where I was putting my strength all the way up to 100, and I was just constantly hitting people with my Lightning Surge and getting my health regen, and then just challenging everything after that, because once you proc Vampire's Caress, you were almost impossible to kill. Outside of these two for the gloves, Eye of Another World I think is a very slept on exotic. It gives you a huge boost to your ability regen. So if you want to invest in some other stats and make them lower, it's like the lower they are, the more work Eye of Another World does. I'll link a video I did below talking about the overall benefits of Eye of Another World, but I think is a sleeper exotic that I could see in the future getting a lot more play as people invest in having higher handling weapons to where they don't maybe need Apathettic aspect as much. Getting into just the rest of our armor, as I've talked about in the past, this is where you want to make sure you're just utilizing targeting and unflinching mods that support the weapons you prefer to use. So I love to use shotguns, usually slugs, but not always, as we'll talk about, and hand cannons. And so a lot of times you're going to see me using hand cannon or shotgun targeting on my helmet, as you can see here. I'm using hand cannon loader and fastball. Fastball I love because it just makes the throw of my grenades, I'm just able to be more accurate. I find I'm not quite as accurate when I'm not using fastball, because I tend to either under or overthrow my nade. With fastball, I find it to be more of like a straight line throw to be more accurate with landing my grenades. And as you can see, I use hand cannon loader combined with the Apathettic aspect to just really double down on that weapon reload speed. And then as you see here, unflinching shotgun aim and unflinching hand cannon aim. Does it make a giant difference? Not a giant difference, but it is somewhat noticeable. So anything we can do to stack the deck in terms of making our weapons more consistent, especially as we're getting fired at, is going to be beneficial. Then here you can see I'm running shotgun holster and radiant light. Radiant Light is giving us that plus 20 strength, again tying into our Lightning Surge melee ability, so giving us a nice boost without having to directly invest in those stats via other mods. And then Shotgun Holster, just because I tend to forget to reload my shotgun, and so this kind of helps me get protected from that. And then lastly here, definitely a non-negotiable if you're running a fusion, shotgun, submachine gun, or a sword. A quick charge here is going to really be beneficial for just getting or for further improving the ready speed of those weapons in combination with Apathettic aspects. Or if you're not using Apathettic aspects, then you definitely want to be using quick charge. And again, depending on the perks on your weapons, this in combination with things like threat detector are super helpful. And you see here I have outreach, reduces my melee cooldown when using your class ability, which is kind of nice because every time I use my rip, it's just going to reduce my melee cooldown just a little bit, and so any little bit helps, which we'll take. Lastly, our weapons, and I'm gonna start with our energy. And as you can see, I'm using Igneous Hammer. I also have in my kinetic slot a Sturm, and I think 120s really are the play for hand cannons right now. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely adore my Austringer, but I just found in the current meta where a lot of people are playing back with scouts and pulses, having a 120 and to be able to still use a hand cannon at some of these longer ranges, I truly enjoy. As much as I love my pulses, I enjoy the most when I'm using a hand cannon. So that's why I have my Igneous and my Sturm, both with pretty good handling and just insane overall stats between the two. And so I really enjoy using both of these, just again compete with those some of those longer range weapons without having to take off my hand cannon. Next we have the Ragnhild D. Could have butchered that, not really sure. Mine is a crafted version. Biggest thing you're going to want on this is elemental capacitors. You get that huge increase to handling. As you see, 82 handling. Like, what does that even mean? But this is the role I went for here. I believe it has a ranged masterwork if I don't recall it correctly, but this is what I would craft if I were any of you, especially if you're thinking about combining it with Arc 3.0. And then you have Hawkeye Breach Armaments, which is nice because it does additional damage against those Titan barricades, which is awesome. And again, pairing these two together with incredibly high handling, you technically wouldn't even need Apathettic aspect, I think, with like this combination right here. Heavy, doesn't really matter personally for me, but I just rock Gjallarhorn just because why not? But I'll switch between any one of these depending if I decide to throw on Sturm or something like that. But the heavy is probably the least important aspect of this build. As you can see, Arc 3.0, like the other 3.0 subclasses for Warlock, packs a ton of utility and an insane melee that truly makes this subclass a lot of fun to play. But let me know in the comments what Warlock builds you're running for Arc 3.0 in PvP. And if you enjoyed this video, check out my Solar 3.0 build at the top or my Void 3.0 build at the bottom.